It speaks to the nature of how space really brings people and nations and different religions together. We all look up at the night sky and the moon, and all our boundaries are blurred.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Oh yeah, baby.
Ansari. Who was that, Matt?
That was Anousha Ansari, who, of course, her family are part of the Ansari X Prize, multi-billionaire people. But she herself was the first Iranian astronaut, I believe.
And what a lovely quote to start the show, because isn't that true, what she said, Matt?
No, absolutely, especially considering she was talking about an Israeli project and she's from Iran.
Yeah.
Space brings us all together, particularly the moon.
Really does. So, Matt, on this day, Wagwan.
Wagwan on this day. Well, we should celebrate the birthday of Dr. Kimberly A. Weaver, who was born April the 19th. But let's not say her age.
No.
Well, it's public record, Jamie.
Oh, okay.
There's no point skirting around this issue.
Yeah.
1964, very famous astrophysicist, astronomer and professor, often on the telly. Her main expertise is X-ray astronomy.
She credits Apollo 11 as the inspiration to become a career scientist at NASA.
PhD, University of Maryland, College Park, in complex broadband X-ray spectra of Cepheid galaxies. That's what her doctoral thesis was in.
Aha. So during her tenure at Goddard High Energy Astrophysics Lab, she worked extensively with the Chandra X-ray telescope, among others, making important observations with respect to starburst galaxies, black holes, and other astronomical phenomena.
As well as working at NASA at the moment, she's also the adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore.
So she's been published in over 60 scientific journals. I mean, wow, the list is pretty damn impressive, isn't it?
Yep, so things like On the Evidence of Extreme Gravity Effects in MCG 63015. That falls off the tongue, that one, doesn't it?
It's a classic.
So she's also got a book out, The Violent Universe, Joyrides Through the X-Ray Cosmos.
Yeah, I need to get that.
That's kind of right up your street, isn't it?
It really is. I just received my In Einstein's Shadow, my black hole book. I'm very excited about that.
Very cool. I've just finished reading Dr. David Warmflash's Moon Compendium. It's very good.
I mean, it's got to be good. Warmflash does not write bad books.
One last fact about Kim Weaver is she really likes the ghost Elvira in Noel Coward's Blithe Spirit.
There we go. Can't say I'm familiar.
No, I'm not familiar with that particular character, but I always think it's amazing that people who've got these absolute stellar careers, writing books, writing journals, working for NASA, being a professor, and she still has time to do community theatre, acting, singing, dancing, directing, producing and designing sets and costumes in her spare time. What the heck?
Yeah, that's impressive.
That kind of person always has like extra string to their bow.
Well, Dr. Kimberly, we think you're great. So happy birthday.
There was some sad news this week.
Oh, okay.
And that was the passing of Owen Garriott.
Oh.
Who, of course, was a Skylab astronaut and also flew on the space shuttle in 1983. So he 1973, Space Lab 1, 10 days, and 1983, 10 years later, went on space shuttle.
Rest in peace, OKG.
What a remarkable person. Do you know he's the first astronaut to have passed a PhD? I don't think he was the first PhD in space, but he had the earliest PhD, i.e. he'd got his PhD very early on, way before he became a astronaut or trained at NASA. So he got a PhD from Stanford University in electrical engineering in 1957. Oh no, actually, 1960. He got his degree in 1957. And then flew fighter jets. Was a professor. Wrote 45 scientific papers before going into space. But of course, the reason why us Brits know about him more than normal is because he's the dad of Richard Garriott, who's one of only 7 of the British-born astronauts in space. You must
Okay.
remember he was our astronaut of the week,
do.
episode 102.
Who couldn't forget that episode?
And weirdly, Richard Garriott started following us this week on Twitter, which I thought
Well,
was...
there we go. What
So,
took you so long, Rich?
My commiserations go out to you, Richard, and my thoughts, but thank you for following us on Twitter.
Absolutely. Commiserations and, yeah, rest in peace. What a great man. While we're on sad news, well, although is it sad news, Matt?
I'm not sure it is sad news. You know,
I mean,
Jamie,
we need to look at this with fresh eyes, don't we?
I think that this has to go down as a very successful failure. And that, of course, we're talking about Beresheet. And
Yes.
so agonizingly close.
It was a close one.
To becoming the first commercial lander on the moon. I mean, it would have been an incredible feat. Bear in mind that neither America or Russia managed a soft landing on the moon with their first attempt. But at the end of the day, they're the first commercial company to smash something into the moon, as far as I'm aware. And there's actually a chance that some of the objects on the Beresheet lander are intact and possibly doing their job. But we'll get onto that.
We will get onto that.
So Maurice Kahn, one of the guys involved, obviously, with Space IL, he basically said, well, we didn't make it, but we definitely tried. And I think the achievement of getting to where we got is really tremendous. I think we can be proud.
Here.
It was 11th of April. It all went slightly wrong. Did you know that the lander was originally conceived by 3 people? Jonathan Weintraub, Yariv Bash, and Kfir Damari.
I didn't know that.
They were in a bar in Halon near Tel Aviv, and they were members of Space IL, and they thought, let's build a lunar lander. So they're basically high on booze.
I was going to say, all the best things get conceived over a pint, don't they, Matt?
Well, like the Interplanetary podcast.
Oh, exactly.
So do you know what caused the problem? And this is a classic. It's got to be a classic, this one.
It's software command upload, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To fix a sensor problem.
Yeah, so you have inertial measurement units, which are electronic devices that basically measure the forces that your machine is coming under. So you can have angular rate, gyroscopes, accelerometers. Your mobile phone has a kind of IMU in it,
yes.
Inertial measurement unit. And yes, it was that was playing up. So one of the IMUs was playing up. So they sent a little software update to kick it back in. But that started a cascade of events that shut down some of the electronics, which meant that the main engine, which of course is this British-built Leros, even though Leros is built by a company, well, the company that own the factory, I guess we could call it in Britain, is a Norwegian-Finnish aerospace defense group.
Okay.
NAMO.
Oh.
It's like ammo, but with a N at the beginning.
Well, I like it.
But the last time we talked about Leros, it was owned by another company called Moog, which is an American defense company. So it's obviously that company changes hands all the time. But Leros it's used on lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different satellites, including Juno. So the engine had shut down, and a lot of people were blaming the engine, saying, "Oh no, it's the engine's broken." But it wasn't the engine; it was the electronics that had gone down, thanks to this software upload that had been sent to solve this IMU problem. But it really looks like that the IMU failure wouldn't have caused a major issue and wouldn't have caused the loss of the spacecraft because there's redundant systems.
Right.
So it really was a bit of a cock up, that. But I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, imagine how many of those type of events happened as Beresheet worked its way across the solar system in cislunar space between Earth and the Moon. Doing that, what a really fantastic maneuver of being in orbit around the Earth and then just keep widening your orbit until you suddenly cross the orbit of the Moon and then get into orbit around the Moon and then attempt your landing. And it did all of that. There was lots of anomalies on the way, space radiation blasting into the electronics and them having to do lots of different things. So they must have learnt loads and loads of things.
This is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, space is ridiculously hard, Jamie.
It's very hard, but I tell you what, they know. Then they're going to know what to do next time.
Yeah, and not only that, it did get a few photos as it was descending down to the Moon. So
yeah, one of them was really ace.
Yeah, there's some really great. Yeah. There are some great little photos that it did, but it looks like there's a chance that the lunar retroreflector array that you talked about when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that might be intact. So David Smith of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he said, he's the guy that's in charge of the actual instrument. He said that there may be a chance that it survived the crash, but may be separated from the main body. But what's incredible about this, he says, of course, we do not know the orientation of the array. It could be upside down, but it has a 120-degree angle of reception, and we only need one of the 0.5-inch cubes for detection. But it certainly has not made it easier.
Oh my lord!
So as this great big little ball has rolled around on the floor, it doesn't necessarily have to be pointed perfectly back at Earth. They only need a tiny bit of it facing this way to be able to reflect the lasers back, so they can do their measurements. And of course,
this is
line. Yeah, it's how we know that the Moon is slowly drifting away from us. That particular type of experiment. So that's pretty incredible, isn't it? And also all those archives that Beresheet was carrying, they might be intact as well, of course. But I love this quote from Nova Spivak, the co-founder of the Arch mission, which I believe is the archive that was similar to the one that they send in Elon Musk's car. He was saying, we have either installed the first library on the Moon, or we have installed the first archaeological ruins of early human attempts to build a library on the Moon. It's a clever way of looking at it.
That is a clever way of looking at it. Imagine, what book would you have, Matt, if there was a library on the Moon?
I would take out Valis by Philip K. Dick.
It's a strong one.
It is. It really is. The NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter may actually be able to check out in the next couple of weeks the state of Beresheet at the crash site. So we actually might have some answers to some of, whether the litho breaking was as extreme or not as extreme as feared.
TBC.
It's not all over, and it's definitely not all over because Maurice Kahn announced that they're going to build Beresheet 2.
It was inevitable. Good luck, people.
Absolutely. Now, hot off the press.
Go on.
Last second addition to the podcast, Jamie.
Ooh.
One of our very cool Discord server Patreons, Rob.
Go on, Rob.
Sent over a beauty of a paper from Cornell University.
Okay.
On the discovery of a meteor of interstellar origin.
Now we're talking.
Now, I know you're thinking we're talking about Oumuamua.
Nah, can't be.
Well, no, it's inspired by Oumuamua. So this is a paper by Amir Siraj and Abraham Loeb. Now, I knew Abraham Loeb was a familiar name. So he's the same person that wrote about Oumuamua being an alien light sail. And we talked about that in episode 106, if you want to go back and have a little listen. And he's the one that pointed out that the chemical soup on Europa might not be suitable for life, and that was episode 116.
That's why I put him out of my memory.
No, I know you're not a fan of Abraham Loeb, but this
No.
one is.
I don't like your negative thinking, Abraham.
Well, he had positive thinking about it might be an alien light sail.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
This guy's he's getting some very interesting papers out there. So this one is about how looking at something like Oumuamua allowed for a calibration of the abundance of interstellar objects. And he is saying that you'd expect a much higher abundance of smaller interstellar objects, with some of them colliding with Earth frequently enough to be noticeable. So they went back through the catalogue called the CNEOS catalogue, looking for things that could have been asteroids coming from other solar systems.
Okay.
And they detected one from 2014 as originating from an unbound hyperbolic orbit with an asymptotic speed of 43.8 kilometers a second outside of the solar system. So this is an object that's come in, and and using the data from this catalogue of asteroids that burn up in the atmosphere, they've worked out that it must have been not on an orbit around the sun, but coming in from coming in from interstellar space. And they've worked out whereabouts it's coming from. So it's coming from the deep interior of a planetary system of a star in the thick disk of the Milky Way galaxy.
Now I'm interested. Keep talking.
So that's come in. And what they're saying is that this discovery enables a new method for studying the composition of interstellar objects based on spectroscopy of the gaseous debris as they burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. So if you can do spectroscopy on the objects as they burn up in the atmosphere, you might be able, and you're able to track back where they came from. You can actually start to work out the composition of other solar systems.
Yeah, that's amazing, actually.
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it, that? But, this is obviously one of these fairly tentative studies, so let's not go overboard, but it's a very interesting concept.
But I love going overboard. You know that.
Absolutely.
And Matt, do you know what my nickname at college was?
Overboard Jamie.
No, hyperbolic Jamie.
Was that because the way you put your shorts on in games?
It's just how I orbited everyone.
It was the way that you swung in from an attacking midfield position.
You should have seen me. You should have seen my movement.
It was your movement that was great in the game, wasn't it? It was
like a butterfly.
You could read the game like Stephen Fry reads Audible books.
Oh, what a voice. What a voice, Mr. Fry. I tell you what we should talk about, Matt. Have you charged your drink?
I have charged my drink. Are we ready?
Let's do this. So, SpaceX,
who are owned by
Elon Musk,
drink
D-Rink. How many times are we going to be wowed by the landing of boosters? And this time, 3 perfect landing. 2 on land, 1 out at sea on the barge. It was their first commercial launch of Arabsat, the communication satellite that they threw up into space. Amazing. Did you watch this, Matt?
Oh no, do you know what? I was actually editing the podcast. I was editing last week's podcast, and I'd just finished, and I was just publishing it. And I literally published it just as Falcon Heavy was taking off. So yeah, it was. I was up doing that, and it was so epic. Do you know what? I actually really did take my breath away. The ballet of the 2 boosters as they land.
I mean, it just like last time. It just doesn't look real. It looks like an animation, and then you realise it's not. I mean, 3 Falcon 9s, pretty much strapped together to become this amazing Falcon Heavy. So lots of upgrades, Matt. Musk said that Block 5 is capable of flying as many as 10 times with virtually no refurbishment between flights. That's impressive, isn't it?
That is impressive.
Do you think they even give it a wipe down?
I think that the one that will be incredible is the one where they fly and they fly the same booster the next day. That will be, for me, the really big moment.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been having other discussions about the boosters and the way that they land on the Discord server, and we were commenting about what Alan Bond had said about how he didn't think it was safe. And everyone on the Discord server was pointing out the fact that these boosters, as they come down, if there's any, they basically aim for the sea if there's any problems, and it's only when they're verified that everything's working that they actually start returning back to the launch pads. But maybe Alan Bond was talking about using them for, point-to-point transfers on the Earth. I think probably. I don't know. It's a bit of an odd one. I should have pushed Alan Bond further on that point, but it was still an interesting point. It's definitely easier to land on an undercarriage than it is with these enormous rocket boosters landing down on rockets. It just seems so improbable, doesn't it? When you look at it, it's just incredible.
Well, that is definitely the case. I mean, it blows my mind. Wow, congratulations once again, SpaceX.
So one thing that has happened since then, we did get all 3 boosters were recovered. However, the booster that was on the drone ship, because there was such rough seas, toppled over and fell into the sea.
Oh.
So yeah, so they actually.
So when I said they all landed perfectly, I mean they did, but then one fell over.
Yeah, so unfortunately it's fallen over. But it does look like they're going to recover it. So it's going to come in like a sort of boat itself. Yeah. And Elon Musk seems to think that the engines are going to be okay. So that should be interesting.
Salt water never hurt anyone.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing where it's like, surely that means that they can't just fly it again. But anyway, what an exciting launch!
It really, really was.
Are we going to get bored of Falcon Heavies?
I'm bloody not.
They're starting now we've got a commercial launch of Falcon Heavy. I think it's a bit of a game changer, isn't it?
Really is game changer. I'll tell you what, just as exciting as that, Matt. Do you know what I learnt about this week? Have you heard of the British artist Anthony Gormley?
Of course. Well, I know who Anthony Gormley is, yes.
You know this guy, Body on the Beaches, he was famous for? Well, he has teamed up with Yale astrophysicist Primavada Natarajan. I hope I've pronounced that right. Sorry if I haven't.
I think it's Priyamvada Natarajan.
Oh, well, let's go with that one. And they've created their very first virtual reality work called Lunatic. And you see what they've done there, Matt, because it's basically recreated a sensation of walking on the moon's surface. My work has always tried to explore the dialectic between the body as an object in space and the body as a place containing the infinitude of space, Gormley said. He said, our nearest neighbour is the moon, and this project allows us to experience it as a found object in space, to explore its vast open spaces and swoop the ridges and valleys of its craters. Now, I'm really excited to go down to this. It's 180, the Strand in London, and it's until, I think, the end of April. So head down.
Absolutely.
Get your VR set on and walk on the moon.
I do love Anthony Gormley. There's a fantastic Iron Man sculpture in the centre of Birmingham by Anthony Gormley. Beautiful centerpiece. It's very. I do really like Anthony Gormley.
Here we go. So it's on till the 25th of April. So you haven't got long. Head down.
It's such an art phrase, though, isn't it? A found object in space. A found object. It's come on. Right. Anyway, but Jamie, shall we go on to listen to my quick chat with David Baker yesterday?
Let's absolutely do that.
Any fans of Moon 2024 maybe want to cover their ears.
Does contain spoilers.
Écoutez.
The interplanetary podcast, putting the ace back into space.
David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Lovely to be back.
The first place we should really start is the big news story, and that is NASA Pence coming out and saying it's not good enough. We need to be on the moon by 2024. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it can always seem a little impertinent making comments about the elected leader of another country, can't it? As though we are pontificating about a process over which we have no direct electoral control. But I think certainly I speak regularly with a lot of friends, colleagues, and work associates in the United States, and they have given me full and free permission to wax forth on this disruptive and damaging president who is causing very, very serious concerns among a lot of scientists and engineers. At the very top, you've got an absolutely fantastic rallying cry ambassador for space and peaceful exploration of space in Jim Bridenstine, but he is, of course, under the hammer from the White House. It's a White House appointment, and so although he has been, yes, we can do that, we're up for it, response to the president's call, everybody beneath him is just groaning and covering their head with their hands because this ain't going to happen, folks. It just cannot. It's simply impossible. And the most concerning thing is that it's disrupting the migration from a government-centric dominated development program to one which is a hybrid involving the commercial sector, which is the only way we're going to get back to the moon and get on to Mars. And still that's going to need full support from the international community. And we should reflect on the fact that NASA has just completed, and in fact in the next issue of Spaceflight out at the beginning of May, I've gone into a very extensive technical discussion about the strategy that NASA had in place for 2028 landing on the moon. Well, that's the target. Nobody expects it to be in the 2020s, but it's important to have some kind of orientation. Suddenly, out of nowhere comes Trump realizing that the big shout-out of the program that he's given the nod to, getting back to the moon, is going to happen in the tenure of his successor. So suddenly turned around and ordered Vice President Mike Pence, who and I suppose I can quote this because it has been published, Pence the Poodle, as he is known by those who are very concerned about these wild both claims and demands from the president, to announce at a meeting of the National Space Council suddenly an edict from the president, oh no, you've got to achieve it during the period of my second term of office. Now, this is always assuming he gets a second term, which is highly debatable. But here again, we get into the problem where a president is using the space program for political aims and objectives. And while it's up for a lot of humor and jesting, I think the really serious problem is that in doing so, if there was a crash program to be back on the moon within the next 5 years, it is going to be wholly, exclusively government-led. There's going to be no space or place for the commercial marketplace, and yet it is that path that the Trump administration purports to be the one that it is taking NASA along, this hybrid between government and the private sector, which I think is a very, very appropriate one to go through. So it's disruptive, it can't happen, and I think it's very, very quietly and very quickly being retired out of the picture, because all of a sudden Pence has gone silent mode on this, when I think while Bridenstine was making a lot of public assertions with bright-eyed optimism and that boyish, mischievous face he can put on when challenged by something that every sensible and sane person would say is totally impossible, even Bridenstine, I think, has come back and realized, because we have passed the date on April 15 when he had pledged to put up a strategic roadmap plan to get back on the moon by 2024 to satisfy the edict of Pence and the requirement of Trump. So, in fact, it is being retired because it just cannot happen. Coupled with a few weeks after serious explanations to congressional committees that the Space Launch System could easily be still 2 to 3 years away from a first flight because of serious managerial malfunction and technical problems, and a development path which went up so many dead ends and then had to be reversed out of and rejoin a more sane approach toward the development of this launch vehicle. It has delayed it beyond and beyond and beyond, and it's really quite reflective when you look back to when the SLS was, or emerged after the demise of the Constellation program and the Ares launch vehicle, the Ares 5. It was to have been flying by 2017, and here we are talking about apologizing because it won't be ready now until 2021 or 2022, possibly at the very earliest. And I think certainly we can say good night to it being on the pad within the next 2 years. So immediately after that, you had a complete turnaround by NASA to put in a very, very logical program. And if you feel we can, Matt, I think we should just talk a little bit about what that 2028 strategy is, because forget the 2024, it ain't going to happen.
It's quite funny, isn't it? I mean, I just want to just quickly just cover one point, was that we had that announcement about how the first few exploration missions of Orion might not be on SLS, and then that was rowed back almost within a week and a half, wasn't it? And then and then we had the 2024 announcement. I thought, this is surely just going to be another one. That for me, it's like they're thinking, just sort of thinking out ideas out loud, and not. It's like they're not even talking with one another. It just seems to be crazy.
It's Alice in Wonderland. But I think, I think it's discrediting NASA as well among the international community, because there was quite a large space congress a few weeks ago, a week ago as we talk now. And it brought serious head-scratching concerns from the international partnership that were moving solidly behind NASA with regard to the Gateway and getting back on the lunar surface with a more permanent stay. And NASA had a very, very good strategic plan, which is the one that I've explored in detail in this next issue of Spaceflight. But if I may, Matt, I'd like just to talk a few minutes about that.
Absolutely. So, we go back to the original 2028 plan, which I always thought was mega ambitious before someone said the 2024. I suppose that's the only good thing, is that now 2028 seems, maybe that's more reasonable.
Well, when the Gateway concept came along and was generally approved and ratified in principle, if not in signature, by the International Space Station partners, because don't let's forget, already the international partnership is enabling NASA's prime flagship manned spaceflight program, human spaceflight program, Orion, because the most important element of Orion is the bit that keeps all the equipment that maintains life aboard the spacecraft, and that's being built in Europe and is on a rolling contract. It's not as though just the first one is being built in Europe and then the rest will be built in America. There is a rolling production for the service module for the Orion spacecraft. And it still just amazes me, having spent decades of initially direct involvement and latterly commenting upon the NASA human spaceflight program, it just is amazing to me that we have reached a position where the flagship human spaceflight spacecraft in the NASA inventory is half of which is being built in Europe, and it just blows me away when I think in the Mercury, the Gemini, the Apollo, the shuttle, when in fact the British aircraft industry were bidding and looking as though they would build the wings for the shuttle. There was a massive slapdown of that by the Defense Department and the State Department in the 1970s. And that whole work, and I still have the study documents on all the proposals that went from British Aircraft Corporation, whatever it was in those days in the early 1970s, when NASA was looking to internationalize the shuttle program and so have the wings built in Europe. And Britain would have been the country that most likely would have built the wings for the reusable vehicle. But of course, because NASA required the US Air Force to have a very strong lobbying content in pushing the money for shuttle through Congress, they had to oversee and approve every contractual element of the mission, even though NASA was paying for it, and the Air Force didn't spend a penny on the shuttle apart from chipping in for the development of the implausibly ambitious Vandenberg Air Force Base dual launch capability, which of course the shuttle never did get after Challenger. That was shut down as an idea, and the Air Force moved away from shuttle completely. Here we are again now in a completely new iteration of events, and we have Europe solidly involved in the development of the Orion spacecraft, and so you annoy or disenfranchise the international community support for all of NASA's future human spaceflight programs at your peril. But the overall strategic leadership has to come from NASA because that does have the biggest budget and it does have the biggest research, test, and development facilities for human spaceflight, and so it's natural. And when NASA was looking at using the Gateway as a stepping stone to the surface of the Moon for a permanent base, in the last few months, it's baselined and stabilized a requirement to put 4 people down on the surface for 7 days of continuous EVA activity. And Lockheed Martin were fast out the traps on the race to try to get a vehicle that was capable of performing that. And it came up with a single lander, which was conceived and devised on paper at least last year in 2018. But the vehicle weighed 62 tons fueled and 22 tons empty, and that, of course, was far too big to be able to support with the existing inventory of launch vehicle systems, because NASA, as well as the direction of the White House, wanted NASA to heavily involve the private sector with commercial launch vehicles. And when they looked at a 2-stage vehicle for that, they realized it would already require a vehicle weighing more than 50 tons, which of course was way beyond what any existing launch vehicle could support. And it was divided into an ascent module, very much Apollo lunar module-like configuration of an ascent module and a descent module. And the ascent module would have weighed in the 9 to 12 ton range, and the descent module in the 32 to 38 ton range, and that was still too heavy. And so the architecture was driven by the available launch vehicles. And this is a refreshing shift from the time when you were getting it. It's really like building a big skyscraper on the concept of build it and they will come. In many ways, we need to reverse that, and we need to have an objective before we build and devise a vehicle with a specification pulled out of the air. And Space Launch System was very much a specification pulled out of the air. There was no stated specific mission objective. It just seemed the right size of vehicle to go for a major government Saturn V heavy lifter class vehicle. And so it's good to see NASA actually changing the roadmap in order to match the practicalities of what will actually be able to launch these things, rather than the parallel development. It's often said in aviation, the thing you never should do is build a design based upon brand new untested engine, brand new untested airframe. And this, unfortunately, has been the way the space program has been evolving, and it's why it's taken so long to get things done. Because you have two parallel systems very often not fully, completely integrating in comfort. Launch vehicle and spacecraft with a mission that's thrashing around among an unknown number of various options. And of course, we've seen that palpably with the Space Launch System and not knowing what to do with it. Asteroid missions, Mars mission, Moon mission. And so now at least, if NASA is allowed to just get on with this job and not have these political interventions, the structure of this three-module structure, which has now defined how NASA was proposing to get to the moon by 2028, with a rolling continuum of not permanently manned bases on the moon, but certainly frequently, much like a Skylab operation where you had a crew of 3 men going and then you had a gap. And then you returned again with a second visit, and you had a gap. And so this is how NASA is looking at going from the Gateway to the moon, that you spend a week or two down on the surface, and then you spend a few months, and then you go back down again, or to different particular locations on the lunar surface, with each of those within the overall architecture of lunar operations. So what we've got now is a 3-stage system to operate from this near rectilinear lunar halo orbit, and that would be defined by the ascent module, which is 9 to 12 tons, and a 15-ton descent module, and a 12 to 15-ton transfer vehicle. Now, this is a phased evolution and development, and the RFP for proposals has gone out for the descent vehicle, which was or is to be ready by 2024, and it will have a payload capability in excess of 9 tons, so you can fit the proposed 9 to 12 ton ascent module on top of the descent module, and that would be able to operate from a 100-kilometer low lunar orbit for development unmanned with the descent vehicle in 2026, and then manned after several precursor test shots in 2028, hence you're putting people down 9 years from now. Now, NASA has issued requests for proposals on those elements, as well as the transfer vehicle. And the transfer vehicle is what we used to call the space tug. And that would remain in space and shift hardware between low lunar orbit and the Gateway, which is in this elliptical halo orbit. And this elliptical halo orbit is necessary because it's stable with regard to the gravitational anomalies, the mascons and the minicons. And the transfer vehicle would be refuelable. It would have a capacity of 10 tons and be fully on station operational by 2028 to support the lander. And the total lander elements to 21 to 37 tons is quite capable of being accommodated with co-manifesting on the Space Launch System, and it is perfectly compatible with existing launch vehicles, particularly those from SpaceX and the evolving launch vehicles from Jeff Bezos. And so that is a progressively doable plan. And it was to have been preceded by a series of unmanned vehicles, which are already under contract. And those are essentially part of this Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLIPS initiative. 9 companies with a cumulative value of $2.6 billion over 10 years are developing before the ascent, descent, and transfer vehicles for supporting humans to reconnoiter and survey the lunar surface. And this is a transfer from NASA program. The Resource Prospector has been cancelled. That was cancelled last year. It was to have launched in 2022, and it was to have had the objective of assessing the distribution of water on the moon, because there's much evidence for water resources, particularly in the polar regions. But this is lunar water. That's not water in either liquid or vapor state, but it's in a molecular form which attaches to the grains that compose the rocks and the materials of which the moon is made. And precursor lunar orbiting spacecraft, Lunar Prospector, Chandrayaan, and Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, 10 years now since that was launched, have all confirmed that there's a sparse and a very thin layer of water existing in some areas around the moon. And so Resource Prospector was to have done that. But early last year, it was recognized that this is going the expensive NASA over-bureaucratized route. And so the CLIPS program of these 9 commercial bidders to put little landers down on the surface is offloading the experiments that were to have gone on the NASA-only Prospector mission and disperse them around these commercial landers, which will be flying to the surface potentially from the end of this year, although that is stretching things rather a bit. And this is where we come to the fact that I mentioned earlier, that in a hurry-up, you don't have time for all these commercial bids and commercial designs because they're going to take longer. These are startup companies or little companies who will need time to develop and evolve these information bases upon which a proper lunar science and resource analysis program can be built. So it's really counterproductive to the Trump mantra of going private, going commercial, getting NASA out of the business of building and bureaucratizing these programs, when clearly private industry, entrepreneurs, new startups, new space can do things faster, leaner and meaner, and with less bureaucracy. So that's how it stands at the moment. So we don't want this disruption. We do not want to be on the moon within 5 years. Be great, be lovely, but you'd wreck. It's the wrecking ball that will come in and completely demolish all of these incremental plans that now at least are seeming to have a reasonably working mandate. And main elements of the gateway are in fact to be the responsibility of JAXA, of ESA, of the Canadians, of NASA, and of Roscosmos. And now all of a sudden you've got this, and at this meeting just a week or 10 days ago, this major space conference where Bridenstine came in, all bells and trumpets whistling and blaring, that yes, he's up for going to the moon in 2024. And by the way, I will be back by the 15th with a proper strategic plan. Well, big flat silence, and we're several days on from the 15th of April as we speak now, and no response, because you just can't make it happen. It would completely destabilize and ruin this wonderful hybrid connection between new space and old space.
Yeah, that's it's. Do you know what? The only bit of solace I was getting from 2024 announcement, because even I can see that it was a pretty ridiculous thing to say. And the only solace I could get was the fact that it would, for me, it felt like it was going to accelerate this private and government partnerships. But now you've put that case, it's kind of, it doesn't even do that. It disrupts that and spoils that element of it. So yeah, that's that's quite depressing. Yeah, I mean, so is virtually everyone that you're speaking to really just ignoring that 2024 and concentrating on this 2028 timeline now that it's becoming more fleshed out and we're seeing it?
I think they're sharing with sympathy the embarrassment of the real brains in NASA, of which there are very large numbers, the scientists and the engineers, the scientific community. And let's forget, we talk about NASA doing this and NASA doing that. NASA is responsible to groups like the National Academy of Sciences and to all of the various advisory bodies that dictate essentially and do so to Congress in hearings, which we don't cover enough, I think. The advisory bodies that go and say, well, NASA should be doing this and NASA should be doing that. So when we get Congress coming in and completely changing the programs put forward by the White House, and remember, every time NASA goes up with its budget proposals, and we've just had those for the 2020 financial year, technically starting October the 1st this year, it is as a result of Congress not saying, I know better than NASA, or we know better than NASA. It is that they are responding to very prestigious and erudite advice they're getting from the finest and the most highest performing science and engineering consortia within the United States. And so that is how NASA doesn't sit around a table and say, hey, this would be great, wouldn't it? We can put that with that and that with that. NASA is caught right in the middle between very, very detailed, sensible, sane, methodical, and rational program developments recommended by the science institutes and organizations that recommend national scientific and technological strategies, and between the political mayhem of the White House. And so NASA is right in the middle of these. So it goes to the White House and said, we would like to do this, we would like to do that based on the roadmap we've been working toward. The White House says, either you can or you can't, and remember that in that decision, the Office of Management and Budget, which is the American Treasury, if you will, has to be consulted and has to agree, along with White House policy, what NASA is allowed to ask for. And then the administrator is supposed to stand up as though it's his perfect dream ticket of everything he wanted to see happen. Well, it isn't. He just simply has to be the shout-out voice for what the White House has dictated NASA will do. And that's why I always put the absolutely most important segment in any space program strategy is, what does the White House want about this? And what is Congress going to think about that? Because if those two are not in synergy, it's mayhem. And we saw that when Obama cancelled Constellation for justifiable reasons on expense and everything else. But that's when the White House went head-to-head, and we saw more disruptive problems between the White House and Congress during the Obama years, when there was a stronger Democratic Congress with the Democratic president than we do under Trump, which is quite bizarre, really. It's just that NASA's programs are receiving huge bipartisan support, and it just so happens that Trump's America First and We Can Make America Great Again resonates with a Congress that wants to placate the concerns of its own electorate in its own states. Because remember, 2 senators for each state and representatives that were, in the early days, proportional to the number of people in that state. Now that's all changed because of the burgeoning expansion of the population. But you've got 600-odd representatives and you've got 100 senators, and they're all answerable to their electorate, and in a much more direct and dynamic sense, frankly, than parliamentarians in the House of Commons are to the British electorate, under what we have as an elected dictatorship, essentially, where it is expected that the government is only functional in Britain if it has an overriding total dominance, and therefore you never get to see the true performance of an opposition. We're in these bizarre times in Britain at the moment, and I'm only exploring that issue as a comparator to how decisions are made in the United States. But in the United States, you've got virtually equal numbers of both parties actually in Congress. And there's oohs and ahs of, oh my goodness, it's a Democratic Congress or it's a Republican Congress. But only by 1 or 2 or 3 over several hundred. And so you are really, really looking with a very different animal. And the White House represents the federal interest. Grassroots America is very anti-federal, very anti-state monopoly, very anti-keep government out of the picture. And so the entrepreneurial bids of the private new space marketeers are very much in favor within the various states, while at the same time Congress is expected to look after the big federal programs that bring money to each of these states. And that is why inherent, and I can remember supporting this when part of my job was to support the NASA hearings in Congress. At these various deliberations and at these various hearings, one of the first questions asked was, what is the distribution of employment prospects across the 50 states? And shuttle contracts went on the basis that there was a team at NASA headquarters working as to who got the various subcontracts, and the component supplier base had to be proportionately spread across the 50 states. And that's the dynamic of how these programs work. So at the moment, we have a very, very full bipartisan support in Congress for the NASA program as it's moving forward. And the only reason there's quiet on this issue between the White House and Congress is that for very different reasons. One for domestic re-election investment, and the other for making America great again. The two seem to be running in synergy, but they're both looking in opposite directions for why they're supporting the program at present. And that has to be boring. I know it's boring. It's incredibly boring, because it's not the juiciest meat and veg of real space exploration.
Yeah, the thing that depresses me, actually, I think, is that space exploration should be about scientific discovery, and
yes.
And that 2024 announcement had nothing about what it was that we were trying to achieve scientifically. And the fact that Pence himself and Trump, for that matter, are and are actually genuinely anti-science, even though that phrase just seems to be the most ludicrous phrase ever. But they both are anti-science. I mean, just seems to be. That's for me that's the most frightening part of the administration for me, is that that you're saying that you have all these scientific bodies in America that are advising NASA what they should be doing.
Yeah.
But if you have an administration that doesn't give a monkeys about that element of it, that got to be extremely unhealthy.
Well, let us remind our listeners that, in fact, Congress is a disruptor in many ways. And this is the thing, I think, which maybe our dear British listener probably is too mired in the way things happen here in the UK. They don't happen like this in America. And the White House probably has less traction to achieve its will than a majority party in Britain can, as espoused through the voice piece of the Prime Minister. Because none of these environmental perturbations have actually lasted in America. And yet I continue to hear the media trounce out, America's anti-environment, Trump has squashed all this. In actual fact, it's all been put back by Congress. And all of those 2 years ago, when Trump first tried to tear out the earth science, climate research, and environmental analysis programs, all of those were put back by Congress. And now Trump's learned, because in the budget announced a few weeks ago, all those programs are not contested. There is very, very strong restoration of climate, earth science, and environmental analysis, NASA, satellite, and research programs. It's not just the space hardware, it's the research programs as well, with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Department of the Environment, and with NASA itself. And all of these link into international endeavors. So they're very, very important. And remember that each of the 50 states have reneged on the order from the White House to abandon all of their environmental programs. So while there are some disruptive programs that can be controlled from the White House, and there's one particular horror that's happening in Alaska right now, where they're trying to tear out a whole area of wetlands to build a huge mining complex, which will itself require a 270 gigawatt electrical power production plant. A trench in the earth a mile wide and a third of a mile deep, fanning out from which will be mining tunnels, is going to completely disrupt. That is going ahead. So, listener, you may be aware of that announcement and then say, well, how come you're talking about it all being put back? Because there are some federal programs, licenses for which can be granted by the White House. And there are executive orders which can be issued by the president that ride over states' concerns about environmental issues. But to a state, every state legislature has said that they don't follow the White House mantra on disregarding environmental issues. And every single state in the union is signed up to the logic of the damage that our industrial and our prolific over-extraction of resources from the earth are doing to this earth, and that it can change. And so we need to balance this, these shout-outs from the White House, and the fear that's seared into concerned media around the world, with staring eyes, oh my God, it's all over. No, it's not. And so we need to understand that it really isn't a done deal when the White House says it is.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm passionate about it.
I do think it's a worry when you have the most powerful man in the world. If you have a continual undermining message, it eventually derails things, doesn't it? I mean, sure. I mean, and getting back to the space program, it's kind of done that with, like you said, with the space program, and if you don't have a mission, then this is the embarrassing thing for me, is that for the last 15 years, they've never really nailed down what the mission is and how they're going to do it. And surely that just seems to be costing billions and billions of dollars all around the world.
Yes, yeah. I think as well this whole emphasis on hooking your prestige up to, and I understand space is a prestige issue, and it can be an inspiring and a motivating issue. And in fact, I think when we remind ourselves again that less than 0.5% of federal expenditure, less than 0.2% of all government, state, and federal in America is spent on space, less than 2%. Because we tend to forget that unlike the UK, there is more money in the local government, as we would say here in the UK, in states' expenditure than there is accumulated of 50 states than there is in the federal budget. So we say 0.5% of the federal budget, but that doesn't really say what government in America is spending. So it's actually only 1/5 of 1% of all the money that's collected by governments of states and federal in the United States of America. And so for that tiny amount, if there were no benefits at all, it will be justified on what it is inspiring, on what it is creating, on what it is enabling, and what it is doing among the minds of young, passionate individuals. And I think that's very important. And I think sometimes we hitch our star on too distant a destination. And one of the concerns I've had for a very, very, very long time is the casual way in which we have supported the notion that we can simply up stakes, hitch a ride on a rocket, and be on Mars within a few years. There are so many concerns that are evolving now, and I think one of the most profound was the results that came out a couple of weeks ago. And I don't think I'm contravening any non-advertising issues on talking about this, but Science, one of the two erudite and prestigious peer-reviewed weekly journals, Science was the platform that published the medical reports of the year-long flight with Scott Kelly and a Russian, and of course Scott Kelly's identical twin Mark Kelly, and Scott spent 340 days in orbit on the space station, and what has transpired from that medical result should put shockwaves through anybody who thinks we're going to be jumping off to Mars in the next 10 or 20 or even 30 years. Summing up, basically, thickening of the carotid artery and the retina, weight loss, shifts in gut microbes, reduction in cognitive abilities, that's a scary one, damage to the DNA, changes in gene expression, lengthening of the ends of the chromosomes, essentially the telomeres, and elongation of the telomeres, replaced by accelerated shortening and loss. And the fact that Scott quoted directly, and I'm just looking here at his direct quote, the return was much worse than the adaptation of getting up there. And if we look at the physics-driven trajectories of Mars missions, you are talking about discharging humans to an environment where 2/3 of a 2.5-year trip to on the surface and back from Mars will be spent below 1G. We are far from understanding the consequences, and each one of those items that I mentioned, particularly with cognitive abilities, damage to the DNA, and also the problems with sight and perception, even on 6-month missions, is becoming a serious concern aboard the space station, not to mention the very surprising, if not shock, measurement when they did a microbial analysis of the biota living on the inside of the space station in this supposed ultra-clean environment. They found it is far worse than any contained environment on Earth. Yeah. and all of these, I mean, at the end of the day, this is what is going to matter to people, whether they are physically damaged, debilitated, or rendered either mentally incapacitated or genetically mutated into completely different human beings. Nearly 3 years on space flights where only a few months at 1/3 G is all the respite you're going to get is a far place that we haven't begun to visit in terms of the biophysiological environment we're going to put crews into. And that's important. You know, you can sketch on the back of an envelope how to get to Mars and back, we could do it now if we had the equipment. But whether you've got survivable people or what you're going to do, and as for these who want to go and stay there, there's a lot of problems.
Yeah. So, I mean, that really does kind of point the finger for the next 30 years then, that we really should be concentrating on robotic exploration of the solar system.
I believe so, and I'm a child of the human spaceflight era and spent so many years immersed in it, and it's fantastic. But we cannot, just as Tsiolkovsky said, we cannot live forever in a cradle when talking about leaving and departing Earth. We cannot live forever in our dream worlds of youthful exuberance. We have got to come down to reality and understand what we are giving up by devoting 60 or 70% of space budgets to just this surge to put a very select few humans in very distant places. And we have to ask the question, for what reason? And that has a multitude of answers that can only be rational if we strip away our emotive baggage that we bring to all decisions that humans make. It's the most difficult one I know, and it's a tremendous inspiration. I think we should be building bases on the moon, but I think the surface contact with humans should be, it's much like the use of technology. You should only engage with that is enabling you to do something greater than you can without it, and not make it a fascination and an obsession in and of itself. And I'm getting close here to speaking about a fascination people have with social media, for instance. Yeah. And you can see this is a natural human reaction. It's the most amazing creative tool of the 20th century that we're now exploiting in the 21st. Amazing. I am not decrying it. But it makes us obsessive for the tool and not for the crafted product of that tool, which is the things we can do with it. So I would like to see, on a back burner, the establishment of scientific bases on the moon, just as we have scientific bases on the Antarctic continent, for a meaningful, justified purpose. But a way which now, for the first time, the bow wave of exploration can be with robots. And we can do such amazing things. And I've heard it said, and I've supported this notion, that astronauts in the Apollo era could do many times what any instrument could have done. But we are not living in the age of 50 years ago. In terms of what existed 50 years ago, we are 100 centuries in the future with regard to the pace of technological development. We must not look back. We must look forward and learn that we have to do things in a different way. And I'm just giving the shout-out to the fact that with a balanced reason, if we were to triple the amount of money we're spending in the robotic exploration of the moon, we would then be able to provide the answers that can better frame the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Why go to the moon? We would have better answers because we would know so much more about surface conditions, about what we can do there. And we would know so much that robots are already beginning to tell us about the extraordinary amount. And I think that one of the most amazing things, and I think in looking at all of this, the fact that now we know that the Earth receives about 33,000 kilograms of micrometeoroids every day. And those are mostly hitting the surface of the Earth as microparticles invisible to the eye. 1/3 of all the dust that settles on surfaces in our homes comes from space. And the moon is receiving particles without that shield of an atmosphere at velocities of up to 72,000 kilometers a second. And they are liberating what has been estimated as more than 200 tons of water a year from material thrown up into what is now being called the lunar exosphere. And that has all been determined, all of it, by robotic exploration, both at surface samples returned by the last of the Russian lunar missions and by the unmanned robotic orbiters we have had. The Apollo results took us in the wrong direction, thinking it was a totally dehydrated environment. We now know that it was not because the regolith on the moon, down to about 8 centimeters, from which 90% of the samples came, does not contain any lunar water at all, because it's much lower in the surface and gets thrown up when these impacts create this exosphere, which has been measured and observed. And this links right back to pre-Apollo, the transient lunar phenomena, or the lunar transient phenomena, as they call it in America, which is these little obscurations that amateur astronomers were recruited to observe in the days just before Apollo. Aristarchus was most famous for this clouding obscuration of the surface. They were seeing what we now call the lunar exosphere that is now being measured by robots. There has not been a single human to correct the errors of the Apollo results. That surely is a shout-out for robots.
Gosh, I mean, things like the Indian space program would be a lot healthier if they abandoned human space flight, I suppose, and all around the world. It's not a very good message for human space flight, I suppose.
I think we do need to go there. We need to expand out, but we need to put this greater emphasis on finding the answers to the questions we haven't yet asked.
Thanks very much for joining me again, David, and I'll definitely look forward to this month's space flight. Now I'm getting them again. They're arriving at my house. Yes.
Good luck with the house makeover as well.
Thanks very much. All right.
Okay.
Cheers, David. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Interplanetary Podcast is alive!
There's David's thoughts for the day. We veered quite a lot into weird politics there, but
We love you, Mr. Baker. Incredible as always.
Jamie, we don't have a space fact, do we? That's the one thing I forgot to do. Oh, damn.
Well, I've got a space fact.
Come on then.
I really, really, really love space. that is a space fact.
Wow.
I hope you were blown away by it.
Idiot. Right.
Are we going to get one?
But no one gets to this bit of the show anyway.
Is there anyone listening? Is it just us?
It's just us two talking to each other now.
Well, if there is anyone listening still, Matt, if you've enjoyed this show and maybe you're new to the podcast world, what would you say the next steps are?
I think the next steps would possibly be to run over to wherever you listen to podcasts. It might be iTunes, especially iTunes, actually. And why not leave us a review, particularly if it's a lovely 5-star review? That would be really, really excellent. And if you love us loads, you could pop over to our Patreon page where there's a little bit of extra content and you can be part of the journey and join us. Join us.
Join us.
As correct.
Sorry, that seemed a bit sinister. I mean, join us.
Join us and become a spodcat of some description.
I'll tell you what. I mean, what an elite crew our Patreons are.
Well, I absolutely love them. We're going to give the big shout out at the end of next week's podcast to the beautiful people who entertain me on the Discord server, who continually email and Facebook and tweet. It's great. We love it.
Wait, Matt, are you saying that there's another week for people to get a shout out if they join this elite club?
Big time. Big time.
OMG.
And we've had some new members, so they're going to get their big shout out. Love them.
Well, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Easter weekend. Put some sun cream on. It's going to be warm out there. And just remember, Easter is all about chocolate. Thank you.
Ah, yeah. Happy Easter, everyone. And or happy chocolate eating festival.
What's your favourite Easter egg, Matt?
Ooh, that.
Mine's the red lint balls.
I don't think I have a favourite Easter egg. I think I genuinely make myself sick. And so,
yeah.
And it actually kind of puts me off chocolate for a bit.
Most of you won't have had a dinner with Matt, but I have had many, and he eats like a starved dog. So God knows what he's like around Easter eggs.
Oh no, I do eat very, very fast. It's a big problem, Jamie.
Mastication is very important, Matt. I'm just worried about your guts.
I know. Well, I think someone told me not to masticate, so I
You'll go blind.
So I just got into the habit of swallowing my food. Anyway, on that note, bye, Spodcats.
Goodbye.